So we're starting a new quarter, the Exodus. A lot of things. There we go. A lot of things. Oh, you can hear me. A lot of things going on during this time. A lot of moving parts, if you will. And so a lot of things to consider. One of the things I wanted to do, and I was going to give y'all blank maps. But then I changed my mind, and I was going to, I won't pass them out now, but I was going to pass out, if you'd like a map, because I want you to write on it, like when they come to a certain place, in your own words, what happened there. You can color it, like the lines of where they, some people are getting excited now. Yes, I would expect that because the thing is, like in Bob's material, one of the things he points out that map work is important, and it helps kind of solidify those things. If you do this. It'll only help you. It's one of those things that it makes it more memorable and better to retain. So, like I said, I won't pass these out now, but if you would, I would hope you would like to take one and kind of make it your own, as it were. Like I say, I didn't give you a blank one, so it's got the things on there. So some people might have one place here or one little over there. Now we're going to have it right. But just if you would kind of make notes on it of certain things, that events or something like that might make it easier for you to remember. So I hope that's helpful. And I'm just going to put these up front on the front thing right here. And so we begin with the book of Exodus. And one of the things, I'll go ahead and throw this out as well, certain questions that came to my mind. And I went around and I asked this question to people who hadn't gotten to this yet. But when it said God hardened Pharaoh's heart, how did God harden Pharaoh's heart? I'm not asking for an answer right now. But I want to throw out some questions and for y'all to give some thought to that. So when we do get to that point, that you would wind up, you may have some, because sometimes it helps to think deep like that. How exactly did God harden Pharaoh's heart? As a for instance, we'll look at this one, and I'll go and throw this one out now as we get into it. Why were the children of Israel in Egypt? What was the, when we look at why, we know how they got there, but it was God's plan that they be there. And there were certain reasons for that, some deep reasons, if you will. And so if you'll be thinking about that, and then when we get to where they actually leave Egypt, why didn't they go straight into the promised land? Why did they deviate, if you will, and go down into the Sinai Peninsula? Again, not asking for any answers now, but just some thoughts to think about. Maybe some deep thoughts there. And something we may touch on now or in just a little bit. Why was the Egyptians? What was the purpose in loading the people with heavy burdens to place on them? So we're going to actually get to that. So I'll throw one out now that y'all can kind of be thinking about a little bit. But we're going to start with the 17 time periods, and one of the things when you begin. Looking at things, you like to have a structure, and going through the 17 time periods that we do, some people are like, well, y'all just seem to do that quite a bit. Yes, and I think it helps, and it's new. At least for me, there's things you forget, and it seems to solidify. Helps the Bible story as it were. It helps us to have better understanding. So the first one, and I get it pop up on the thing there, creation. All right, so I'll give you that one, creation. The next one, flood, scattering of the people, patriarchs, Exodus, the wilderness, land, judges, a kingdom, divided kingdom, Judah alone, captivity. Well, there's okay, yeah, and return from captivity, years of silence, Christ, history of the early church, letters to Christians. And yeah, these 17 time periods, and it's like the skeleton, if you will, and we flesh that in. And it really does, when I don't know, when y'all talk to people, and hopefully you do, about various things from the Bible, I think one of the things that I've come away with is that people don't seem to know how things fit together. They look at the Bible like it's a book of mystery. You know, we're the prophets, and this happened, and that, and they you know, and so the beauty of this, it gets tied together very well. And so basically, we're going to be looking at the Exodus and the wandering in the wilderness. So that's the focus of our study this time, and so we want to get that. So in Genesis chapter 50, verses 24 through 26. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I die, and God will surely visit you and bring you out of the land unto the land which he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob. And Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones from hence. So Joseph died, being 110 years, and they embalmed him, and he was put in the coffin in Egypt. And so we see here, we see that you see Joseph's faith in this. If you turn over to Hebrews chapter 11, and I guess one of the things I could actually read a little bit more from Hebrews 11 here. I wanted to touch on this to kind of bring us back up to speed. Before I read the 22, let me start back in verse 8 to kind of, you know, Wes, like I say, has done such a great job. And to kind of get us, you know, looking back at Abraham, I'm going to pick up in verse 8 and just quickly read this. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called out to the place which he would receive as an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. And let me pause there. That's an act of faith. To not know where you're going and God says do it and you do it, yes, that's fantastic. By faith he dwelt in the land of promises in a foreign country, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Let me pause there. That's the essence of, and that should be the basis of our faith. We're looking for something better. We live in this world. And, you know, we're in the world, but we're not of the world. And hopefully we have that kind of faith that we're looking for something better. And as Danny mentioned in his prayer, having that spiritual outlook, if you will, it's not about this. You know, this world is not our home, as it were. Verse 11. By faith, Sarah herself received strength to conceive seed, and she bore a child when she was past the age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Therefore, from one man, and him as good as dead, were born as many as the stars of the sky, in multitude, innumerable as the sand which is by the seashore. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For those who say such things declare plainly that they seek a homeland. And truly, if they had called to mind that country from which they had come out, they would have had opportunity to return. But now they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly country. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. And so when you think about it, isn't that our aim as well? I hope it is. I hope every one of us has that same kind of spirit, that same kind of, that honest heart that says, I trust God. And I'll just pick up in 17. I wasn't going to read that, but I'll go ahead and read that down to verse 22. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and when he had offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it is said, "In Isaac your seed shall be called," concluding that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from which he also received him in a figurative sense. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning the things to come. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph and worshipped, leaning on the top of his staff. By faith, and this is our verse here that we're going to, by faith, Joseph, when he was dying, made mention of the departure of the children of Israel and gave instructions concerning his bones. And so when you see this about Joseph here, and Joseph said, well, I'll go ahead and finish out the thing here, and then I'll make some. God would visit Israel. And it's from a primitive root to visit with friendly or hostile intent. I'll drop down. God will certainly provide for you and bring you up from this land. In Bob's material, for Joseph felt the need to say God would visit them, literally come to their rescue. It seems there was some degree of trouble for the Israelites before Joseph died. So there's been a change in Egypt. Back from the days when he was the second in charge, if you will, up under Pharaoh, and a very highly exalted, highly honored individual. And then now times are changing. Things are, and even before he dies, he makes mention of that, which shows that things aren't quite the way that they were. They had entered Egypt as the honored family, the second ruler of the land. They had special invitation of Joseph, and the invitation seconded by Pharaoh himself. So it was a great kind of situation. And so they do come into there. But conditions have changed completely from the days of Israel's first arrival, yet within the providence of God. And if you turn over to 15, and this didn't take God by surprise. God knew exactly, when we say the providence of God, he knows the end from the beginning. And in Genesis chapter 15, verses 13 through 16, then he said to Abram, know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years. And also the nation whom they serve I will judge afterward. They shall come out with great possessions. Now as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried at a good old age. And let me go and read verse 16. But in the fourth generation, they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. So the point is, God has a timeline, if you will. He has a purpose in mind, and it's going to be, He knows. And one of the things that you see is that you look at it from a earthly, fleshly standpoint, and you're like, as I mentioned, with the children of Israel being down in Egypt, why were they down there again? I mean, now they went in as honored people, but things are going to change. Times are going to get tough. Why would God do that to them? And I'm throwing that out to y'all. Yes.
God wanted his people to be separate, and there was no better place in the world than to be in Egypt when the Egyptians would not intermingle with them. There would be no danger or hazard of the children of God becoming part of Egypt. They were always going to be separate based on Egyptian culture.
Exactly.
All the years they spent there, there was no way that they were going to become part of Egypt's culture. They would be separate people.
And if they had stayed in Canaan, probably what would have happened?
They'd stayed in Egypt.
Yeah. Well, if they hadn't gone to Egypt, they would have been absorbed into. Yeah, intermingled with all the people that God didn't want them to. He wanted them to be a. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I don't even know what the question is.
I'm sorry. No, but hey, you did excellent. You did good. That's exactly right. That the Egyptians, like you said, were a proud people. Yes, Mark.
As great as Joseph was, second only to Pharaoh, the Egyptians weren't even for him.
Exactly. You remember back that was in Genesis. There's three references I got: Genesis 47:6, Genesis 46:34, and Genesis 43:32. And basically, that's the essence of what those say. It was like an abomination. They wouldn't even eat with them. They separated you eat over here, kind of thing. The Egyptians wouldn't even, which is like, wow, which is, I guess if you went there, you might take that as an insult, but they're like, we're up here and you're down here. And yes, Danny.
You think about, there were 70 in all of Israel's family that went to Egypt. And when they came out and were numbered, it was over 603,000, not including the Levites.
And that was the men of war, I think, too. Not that they include the women and children. Yeah, yeah.
So, you look at God's providence, like you said, in making, building up a nation.
Mm-hmm.
The 400 years that they spent in Egypt, as it was pointed out, that they kept themselves separated from the Egyptians. How God brought that about to make sure that the Israelites were isolated and kept separated from the other nations.
And they didn't intermingle at all, just,
Right.
yeah.
Right. And how, I think that's a point we sometimes fail to realize, God's providence in that, in those conditions, to have a I want to say pure breed of people, if you will.
Mm-hmm. And that's what they would be.
To be God's nation.
That they would definitely be a separate people to God. And that was my answer, my number one. But I thought about it, and I thought about this. I thought, not only that, but I think there's some other benefits, or could be, if you look at it from a spiritual standpoint. If you're suffering, you're going through hard times. Well, let me ask you this: if you're going through hard times, or you're going through great times, everything's just your way. Hard times, are you going to be closer to God? Are you going to be thinking more about God? Or over here where things are going great, you're going to be, which would it be? When times are tough, that's when you become probably more prayerful. You're directing toward God. And I thought, the hope that they would have, times are tough here. And they're trying to break us. I would hope that their hope would be, we're looking for God. Just as Joseph mentioned, he tried to, take my boat. God's coming. God's going to save you. And so hopefully they would have that hope. Also, wouldn't you think it would tend to make them a more humble people? Going through some tough times. When you suffer, times are linked. Yes.
We don't know how much we need God when things get bad.
Exactly.
Things are good, we think, yeah, hey, things are
I'm doing it, man. I got,
doing
I'm the guy.
great now. When things are hard, we realize that we don't have control over the situation.
It makes you look differently.
Somebody who does have control over the situation, and it's always God. He's the only one that has absolute total control over what happens in our lives.
And I'm thinking with them down in Egypt, you would think that would be the direction they would go. You would think. And also, like I said, it might make them a more humble, more obedient people. When they, the blessings and expectations that they were going to receive, when God demonstrated His power to them, and there's no question, this is God, God's doing this, and whatever expectations He wants, hey, that's no problem. Hey, we just came out of Egypt. Do you realize how bad we had it there? Hey, anything God says, I'm just saying that you would think that would be the mindset, if you will. You would think, but as we get into that, we're going to see where it. I have a saying, people are people, but God's looking for those honest hearts, and just because you go through hard times doesn't give you an honest heart. But people can come from all backgrounds, and yet they can have that, what I call an honest heart, where they are truly looking for the truth, and when they find it, I'm going to serve God. So just saying. Any other thoughts before we move on? Yes, Rodney.
They didn't totally, they didn't get involved so much with the Egyptian culture, but they were influenced by the idolatry.
Yeah.
Remember when they built the golden calf? So all that, they were influenced by some of that.
Yeah, and you would think, just like how the Egyptians didn't want to intermingle with them, they would have like, hey, we don't want any of your culture, we don't want your influence on us. But you're right, but that's exactly what happened. It did influence them, which lets us know when we're around certain things, we may not realize it, but we can be influenced, and it can have its effect on us. So that's a lesson that we can learn, that you thought that they would have had nothing to do with when they left Egypt. Nothing. We don't even Egypt. I don't want to talk about it. So any other? Oh yes, Barry.
The manifold wisdom or just the working of God in all this. We're looking at maybe from the Israel side of the view, but we know that the iniquity of those that were in that land had not been fulfilled yet. So God's showing His mercy. He's also showing something to the Egyptians. Look at what they're going to see. The real God is, they were worshiping the sun and stuff like that, Ra, whoever. Look what they're about to find out, or be revealed to them. They may not accept it, as the Amalekites didn't either. But God's showing mercy to other people, and it's just, to me, I just can't, it's unfathomable how to understand all that's going on.
Well, that's what I said. There's so many, so many things to consider, and I totally agree with you. I wonder, like when looking at somebody like Abraham and people realizing God's blessing him. I want to do what he does. I want his God. I want to serve his God. But like you said, the Egyptians, with all that they saw, you'd have thought, hey, these other gods. No, there's one God. Yes.
He was going to accomplish his will. This is the way that he's wanted to do it. And you have to believe it's the best way. Just like Abraham, Isaac, and Joseph, all those people believed that his will was going to be accomplished, and they were looking toward him, looking at what he was going to do for us, trusting in him. And we have to believe and trust that whatever happens in our lives is God's will, and we keep looking toward him to the home, the eternal home that he's got for us.
Isn't that the beauty and purpose too? We're considering this here now. This happened so long ago, and yet does it not help build your faith? Does it not help strengthen us when we think about? Yes, right.
Jumping ahead a little, we find out some of the Egyptians did believe the midwives feared God, so it was having influence on some of them anyway. They're seeing who was in control.
Well, you'd like to think that there were some Egyptians that did get the message. You would hope, and the Israelites weren't the only people who were there. There were other Semitic people down there. Remember when they left out, there were other groups, if you will, that went with them, I think. And the point of it is, when you see things that the working of God, hopefully you'd like to think it had the right kind of influence on, like I said, honest heart. Yes.
That was the Hebrew midwife, sorry.
Yeah, that's what I say. Yeah, they weren't Egyptian. They were Hebrew. In fact, we may actually get to them. Any other thoughts or anything? All right. So, and this is in Genesis 12, and we'll go ahead and read this. Now the Lord had said to Abraham, "Get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house into a land I will show thee, and I will make of thee a great nation. I will bless thee and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, curse them that curse thee, and in thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed." So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. And Abram took Sarai, his wife, and Lot, his brother's son, and all the substance they had, and gathered in and the souls that they had gotten in Haran. And they went forth to go into the land of Canaan, and into the land and into the land of Canaan they came. And Abram passed through the land unto the place of, and I think it's Sychem, but I think or Sychem, but I think it's Shechem. If in the looking in my thing, it's Shechem, unto the plain of Morah, and the Canaanite was there in the land. And the Lord appeared to Abram and said, unto thy seed I will give this land, and there buildeth he an altar to the Lord who appeared unto him. And so, when you think about the promises that were given to Abraham, what were those promises again? Be nation, land, and through his seed or spirit. I like how Bob puts it, spirit. It's easy for me to remember. Nation, land, spirit. And the spirit is this, that all the families of the earth would be blessed through Abraham's seed. And so that was something that was going to, and when you look at Abraham, really you look at the Bible, and really the rest of the Bible is really centered around those three promises, if you will. Obviously that third promise, it took a while for it to come about, but the one who would help us for salvation did come. And so the promise was definitely fulfilled. And there was a famine in the land beside the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went unto Abimelech, the king of the Philistines in Gerar. And the Lord appeared unto him and said, Go not down into Egypt, dwell in the land which I shall tell thee of. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee and will bless thee. For unto thee and to thy seed I will give all these countries. And I will perform the oath which I swore unto Abraham thy father, and I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of the heaven, and unto thy seed all these countries, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. You remember that first famine, and I think it was back in Genesis 14. I'm not sure, but it was. But Abraham actually did go down into Egypt, and. You remember the thing that he told his wife, say you're my sister, and Pharaoh did notice her, and so it could have gone horribly wrong, and God, I think, plagued his household, Pharaoh's household, and they got the message, and they sent Abraham out. But this is another occasion when there was a famine, but this time Isaac's told, don't go into Egypt. But he did do the same thing that Abraham did. Tell his wife, tell her, you're my sister, And but we see where God, these promises over and again, gets promises. And I think in Genesis 15, it's where he makes it a true covenant, if you will. And Jacob went out from Beersheba and went toward Haran, and he lighted upon a certain place and tarried there all night because the sun was set. And he took of the stones of that place and put them in for his pillows, and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. Remember, we call it Jacob's ladder. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham thy father, and the God of Isaac. The land whereon thou liest, to thee I will give it, and to thy seed. And to thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. And in thee, and in thy seed, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. One of the reasons I think it's kind of keeps directing us at this is because of the next thing. None of the promises to Abraham were fulfilled by the end of the book of Genesis. All these promises are made. It's a covenant, and yet. God has his timeline, when things will as we think about when Jesus came in the fullness of time, why didn't he send Jesus here? He sent him at the perfect time, the right time. When God performs, when his purpose is to be done, it's done. He knows exactly when, and we might look and say, well, no, there is no. God knows. Israel had a large family, but they were not a nation. So when they went down in this, it was mentioned 70, or some places 75. So one of those things that. But in essence, a large family. And, but the point of it is they were not a nation. At this time, very little of Canaan belonged to Abraham's family. And then you look back at Genesis, but we see Shechem, and then actually that's the land that Jacob had bought after he left Laban, and it's a piece of land. And down in Hebron down there, that's the cave of Machpelah. I think it's somewhere around Hebron there. And so that's pretty much, not the whole land, as it were. This is something that's there's a process, and it's going to be, but again, God has a timeline. But God was right on schedule, and that's exactly right. People look and people predict when the end of the earth is going to happen. When this world's going to be done, and there are people who have already, it's going to happen, and it didn't. And there's other people, it's going to do, and I can ask you, when's it going to happen? We don't know. God knows, and that's enough, But what He does tell us is for us to be ready. If it happens today, we need to be ready. Just saying. By the end of our study, we will see Israel as a nation with its own government and laws. They will be on the cusp of inheriting the promised land. And again, as we talked about, they should have been ready. They should have been, you would have thought, here is a people who have been put in a situation, and when they have the freedom to leave, then hey, they're going to do exactly what God says. And of course, when we get to that, we will look at that and see what happened. But remember that the ultimate promise is the spiritual blessing for the world through Israel, and so we're very thankful for that. The Bible is a revelation of God's scheme of redemption, and we look at the names of the people, Hebrew. And when you look at that word Hebrew, Eberite, and if you go back to Genesis 10:21, it talks about Shem, and the father of, I guess, Eber, and I guess the descendants, the Eberite, that is Hebrew. But it actually came to be one like a stranger, a foreigner, and it was applied to Abraham among the Canaanites in Genesis 14:13. And later it was used to describe the more conservative-minded Jews as opposed to the Hellenistic Jews in Philippians 3 and 5. And so one of the things that you realize is that, and I wanted to read this here too. Let's see. It was by the New Testament days, the word had taken on a new connotation. It was used to contrast one who held devoutly to the old Jewish laws and traditions with one who had accepted the Greek way of life. A Jew who used this term Hebrew in this way would be intending it as a compliment. So back in the days of Abraham, it was a language. Hebrew meant foreigner or stranger, and by the New Testament time, it became one who was. They intended it as a compliment. That you were holding to those ways. This Israelite, descendant of Jacob, of the promise, later figurative of God regardless of fleshly lineage. And if you look in Romans 9 and 6, and we're kind of speeding things along just a little bit, but if you look in Romans 9 and those there, it's talking about who's really true Israelites and who's false Israelites. And there are those who, yes, they were fleshly Israelites, but they didn't have the right kind of spirit, the right kind of heart, and there are Gentiles who you could say are children of Abraham because of faith. And I think back to, I think it's Matthew chapter 3, when John the Baptist was out preaching, and the Pharisees and the Sadducees came to him, and one of the things he said to them, and I can imagine they held so much pride and so much, we're children of Abraham. And John said to him, he said, don't think to say to yourselves that we have Abraham as our father, because God is able to raise up children of Abraham from these stones. And I think that's Matthew 3, verse 9. And the point of it is, I think people, you can put confidence or pride in something, and you miss the point. Jesus, I think it's in John chapter 8, where that they want to kill Jesus, and basically Jesus points out there. Well, let me just turn over there so let me not mess that one up. John chapter 8. Let's see. John chapter 8, and let's see. I could just read verse 39. Well, I'll go back to verse 37. And I know that you are Abraham's descendants, but you seek to kill me because my word has no place in you. I speak what I have seen with my father, and you do what you have seen with your father. They answered and said to him, Abraham is our father. Jesus said to them, if you were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham. And I think that's the essence of that there are people who, you may have the lineage, but your heart's not what it should be, and you have no faith in God as you should, and not in the things that God would have you to. So, so that's something regardless of fleshly lineage. The term Jew, very late in the Old Testament, in 2 Kings 16:6, first use of those of the kingdom of Judah, after captivity, used generally of all Israelites, mostly, and it's what we call people today. He's a Jew, or they're Jewish kind of thing. Let's see. By the New Testament days, the term is often used to refer to in Jesus' day, the term is often used to refer to the Jewish officials who opposed Christ, in contrast to the common people who heard him more readily. It is, of course, the term most widely used today to apply to individuals of this ethnic group. So there's a lot in a name. And I've been meaning to ask Wes when I was filling in for him, and we were looking at the children of Israel, or Jacob, and I thought it interesting that those names meant something. When they named you something, it had a meaning that went with it. And I thought, wow, it's very, very definitive, but it could be scary if you got a bad name, I guess. But again, there's a lot in the name, so the names for God's people. And then we look at the map here, and we see the route of the Exodus, and obviously we're not going to get into that now, but it gives you the lay of the land. And this is pretty much like the map that I'd like for y'all to take. And you get to color the route, if you will, color it red if you want to, the one with the actual thing. But one of the things I want you to notice is you see the land of Goshen, and if you drew a straight line to Canaan, they didn't take that. Why not? They went down, and they were down there for a while. Again, we'll get into that, but just something, just food for thought, just to think about, and you may come up with some things, that may be helpful. Now, these are the names of the children of Israel which came into Egypt. Each man in his household came of Jacob, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. And I pause there. Those names mean something. I don't have my little thing in front of me that I should have brought that if we had time, of what the names mean. But it's just, I just find that very interesting. And all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 for Joseph, and was in Egypt. And I think it's later in, Acts, was it Stephen? I think it might have mentioned 75, if I have that correctly. And Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all that generation. If you notice that 400 years, and going back to Genesis 15, where God mentioned 400 years, and then you see when they come out, and I think it's in Exodus chapter 12, where it talks about 430 years. And some people might see a discrepancy there. Oh, it said 400 years, this says 430. Well, the thing is, I think the 400 is just a round number. Instead of getting into detail, 400 years, about 400 years. And one thing is we don't have time now, but we may take a little bit of time, because you may be aware of this. There are people who find discrepancies with the timing of when they were down in when did the Exodus take place? Who was the Pharaoh? I want to know detail. I want to know exactly, and we're not given that. We're given what we need to know, and really that's the essence of there are those who want to, there's two dates that are thrown out, and they usually say the later date or the earlier date. And if you date it this, we have problems with this. And if you date it with this, we have problems with that. And so there are people who just, but I got to know. No, you don't have to know. You don't need to know. And maybe I know there's a purpose for that. God didn't want to, like when God created the world, why didn't he tell us exactly how he did it to some degree? Why didn't he get into detail? It's just very kind of just, let there be light. How did he do that? That's God. That's the power of God. Again, we don't need to know, and I'm sure we wouldn't be able to understand it anyway. But the point is, there are things that we can know, and there's things that we can't know. And we basically reached the end here. And thank y'all for y'all's participation and everything. Y'all made the first class easier. I appreciate that. Thank you.